written language. Did you recognize that immediately?
Okay, so
When you started to look at these documents?
well, so I did go to Japanese school here every
Okay,
yeah
so this was
on Saturdays, and so I could read a little bit, read and write a little bit, and then I with all these pages, so all the stuff would come back from the Japanese side, and I was the first to look at all of this stuff. And my job was to see that it kind of fit, that their Japanese conversation, English translations fit. And I just sat down with big Japanese English dictionaries. And word by word went through every page. Yes. Yes. Yes.
If a tsunami ever did hit somewhere along the west coast, what kind of effect would it have right here in Elliott Bay in Seattle?
Okay, so most likely the earthquake will be on the outer coast somewhere. I guess it's most likely southern Washington, but we don't know where it's going to break exactly. But southern Washington is used as the modeling sort of a likely scenario. And then the waves would hit Long Beach, Near Bay, everywhere on the outer coast, as well as sweep into the state of Juan de Fuca, but they would have a hard time making the right turn to come down into Puget Sound. So most likely we'll be okay here. The concern in Seattle is the downtown skyscrapers. What is going to happen to those is really not known yet, because a major urban center has not yet been exposed to the level of shaking that is expected. Will those skyscrapers withstand the shaking? People really don't know.
You said, by checking the tree, you could say there was a big earthquake here 300 years ago, right? So the tsunami was felt in Japan side. So is there any sign that this area was also hit by the tsunami, by the earthquake happened 300 years ago here?
Okay, yes. So today I just tried to emphasize the Japanese evidence and kind of ignored all the West Coast evidence here. There's two lines of evidence. One is Native American oral history. Every tribe, up and down, from British Columbia down into Northern California, has such legends of the sea rising and of people jumping into their canoes to escape from the sea. The second line of evidence is a layer of sand that when you dig into the riverbanks on the Washington coast, there's a layer of sand there that should not be there. And the thinking was that, well, when those waves come in, they're carrying all this sand with them, and they lay it down like a blanket on the land. And when this first came out in 1980, this first published in 1987, something like that, just when I was coming out of UW, and it was very controversial. And so all of a sudden, people went out to dig and look for themselves. But it's pretty much accepted now that that's what that layer of sand comes from. There's big waves coming running onto the land. Let's see, there was did you have a question?
You covered it.
Okay.
What about relationship between big earthquakes and volcanoes? Because right now in Japan there is a lot of talk about maybe Mount Fuji may be reacting. But what about here? Because we are close to Mount Rainier.
Right. Yeah. Okay. What is the connection between volcanic eruptions and earthquakes? They're loosely connected, but probably, but we don't think so tightly. When I got my graduate school project was on Mount St. Helens, where I was dating a lot of prehistoric eruptions of Mount St. Helens using the tree rings. And so when this earthquake began to be discovered on the Washington coast, we thought, oh, there's some connection between the two. And we really couldn't find it. Other than that, Mount St. Helens has been active for the last 500 or so years, and then there was a big earthquake.
The one in Mount Fuji erupted, 40 days after big earthquakes in Edo.
Right.
Back in
Yeah.
the 17th century, 18th century.
Right. Well, so the thinking is that after this some big earthquake, all the rocks have moved and they're still not comfortable where they have settled. Right? And so that's the basis for having aftershocks, right? Because everything is still trying to come to equilibrium. But it's a difficult question. Yeah.
Before when you were comparing the tree reading, did you actually go out there and get samples? Did you record the tree or did you?
Okay, yes. Okay. Well, the trees on the Washington coast are huge. Okay. As a graduate student, I started, we had classes and we did cores, right? And so the cores are about the size of a big pen. And we get cores about, this long or this long. But at some point, these are hand cranked borers, and at some point, we just physically can't crank them into the trees anymore because it's too tough to put them in, and then it's even harder to get the borer out. On the Washington coast, we were lucky in having modern clear cuts. Okay. Probably the last old growth, low elevation stem growth of cedars was cut when we were out doing our geological field work. And it's one of those controversial things. We saw the loggers drop these huge trees, the ground shakes and everything, and it's a shame. Okay, but later when the loggers knocked off in the day, we could go after the stumps with chainsaws and just cut a big long strip out of them. So we, just by luck, we got our modern reference samples from those stumps. Now, I don't know what we would have done without that clear cut. Okay, well, yes.
So you had a double major in college, I guess geology and Japanese, or?
Okay, let's see. In college, I was a biology major and a Japanese studies minor. And I was torn which one to major in. And what made me be a science major first was that I would come home on college vacations and look at my parents and all of their friends who were bilingual, and I thought, gee, there's so many people bilingual, Japanese Americans who are bilingual, and it's not doing a lot for them. And I thought, well, if I'm just one more, how is it going to make a difference? Okay. And what I just couldn't see as a college student would be the day when all of that generation retired, right? I couldn't see it. I couldn't imagine it, right? No. And so I guess, I think there were various college counselors who would tell us what to take and what not to take. And I remember several of them always, working on all of us to be broad-based. Don't just do one thing. Do several things. And so I've always been grateful for that advice because sometimes in my life, my science has been paying my rent. Other times, it's been my Japanese. Or the combination.
That's how you couldn't envision the two coming together.
Oh, I never did. And so they were just two separate streams. When my second job out of school, I was working in Boulder, Colorado, and I thought it was a long commute. I drove to work and back 40 minutes every day, which I thought was a big deal. So I was listening to Japanese tapes to and from on my drive just for something to do. But I never thought that I would be able to use them together. Yes.
Are you saying that when you have a flood, the trees just automatically die?
Okay, well, so these trees were inundated by salt water.
Oh, so.
Right. And so we saw that in a lot of the images from the Tohoku coast, right? It seemed like the water never went out, right? The water just kind of sat there on the land. And what it was is that after the earthquake, the earthquake happens, the floor of the Pacific Ocean shoots underneath Japan. And so at first Japan is bulging as these two plates are trying to figure out what to do. And then when the earthquake happens, the upper plate relaxes and the coast lowers. And so the coastal northeast Japan lowered into the sea. And so there was a lot of images there. You see where the the sea is just kind of sitting there on the land. And so these forests must have been kind of in that space where, they're just sitting there in these pools of salty water.
You mentioned the skyscrapers in Seattle.
Right.
Do you know what kind of preparedness went into their construction, like the Columbia Center?
Okay, well, let's see. When did all this happen? The current So she's asking about the safety of the Seattle skyscrapers. Current understanding of Northwest earthquake hazards really didn't change and become what we have today until 1987 or 88, something like right around there. And so anything, and then Washington State building standards didn't rise after that for a couple of years after that. I can't remember exactly. But only until it's only once you get into the 1990s that buildings are starting to incorporate those standards. So anything, let's see, after the Smith Tower, everything, it seems like a lot of building was going on in the 1980s here, in 1990s. So a lot of the skyscrapers were going up in a time period when we thought that the Northwest was relatively benign.
I don't know if there's any relationship between the tide change and the moon, and its effect on earth movement.
And earthquakes? People have worked on that. I don't know what the answer is. The good thing these days is Google.
Well, I think it was Jim. There was a guy in the Bay Area that was part of his, and he was pretty accurate. So I was just wondering if you were familiar with any of that.
Okay. So when you go on Google, there's all kinds of stuff. And so when you really want to know what the world knows and doesn't know, on the Google menu, it says Google Scholar, right? So go to Google Scholar, and that's where you see the academics arguing over it.
I had another question. So, did you say that there were 6 known documents?
Right.
Okay. Were you able to recover all of those, or just?
Okay. Yes. So all six are in the book. I think one of the things we appreciate now is, first of all, how lucky we are that 6 survived, right? Offhand, I don't know how many of these documents that we looked at, and we were looking at the originals and we held them and different things. How many of those made it through this earthquake and tsunami two years ago? I don't know. How many of the people that we talked to, the Japanese specialists in museums and their families and everybody who hosted us there, how many of them made it through this event? I don't know. So we're lucky. Part of it has to do with Japanese paper, right? So it's rather than our wood-based paper, it's fiber-based, mulberry. So it doesn't have the acid. So the paper holds up. And most of them are held in small rural museums or their family heirlooms that have been passed from grandfather to grandson. And so we've gotten it that way. But it's just luck, right?